Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really special. We are breaking down the monumental 70-year joint biography of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. We're talking about the forging of the absolute longest royal partnership in British history. Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did two vastly different people, you have a highly sheltered, protected royal heir on one side and a literally stateless, exiled prince on the other, how did they unite to guide Britain through a century of just profound global, political, and social change? And more importantly, what can their survival teach us about adaptability today? To answer that, here is our roadmap for The Explainer. 1. Two unexpected royal destinies. 2. The crown and consort. 3. Modernizing the monarchy. 4. Decades of crisis. And 5. An enduring royal legacy. Chapter 1. Two unexpected royal destinies. Right off the bat, it's absolutely crucial to remember that neither of these two was originally destined for the heavy burdens of the crown, and this brilliantly illustrates that stark contrast. Elizabeth, affectionately called Lilibet, enjoyed this incredibly idyllic, stable childhood in London. She was third in line. She really never expected to rule. But Philip, his early life was pure chaos. He was literally born on a dining room table in Corfu in 1921. His family was exiled just a year later, and he grew up as a stateless royal, relying pretty much entirely on the charity of his Mountbatten relatives. But, for both of them, World War II acted as this intense coming-of-age crucible. Elizabeth possessed this quiet, fierce determination, and she actively fought for her independence to serve her country. By 1945, she was in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, literally training as a mechanic and a driver. Philip, meanwhile, was proving his absolute mettle in active combat. As a Royal Navy officer, he served in the Mediterranean and the Pacific, and was even mentioned in dispatches for his actions during the Battle of Cape Macapan. This wasn't just a war for them. It forged a rugged sense of duty that became the absolute bedrock of their entire marriage. Chapter 2. The Crown and Consort. Let's move to and see how this builds, because their converging paths suddenly forced them to take on the ultimate royal duty way earlier than anyone anticipated. In 1936, King Edward VIII abdicates, and boom, Elizabeth is now the heir presumptive. Fast forward to 1947, a post-war Britain celebrates as they marry at Westminster Abbey. But then came the absolute shock of 1952. While the young couple was on tour in Kenya, King George VI passed away at just 56. It fell to Philip to take his wife into a Kenyan garden and break the devastating news that her father had died and that she was now queen.
And her reaction in that completely chaotic moment is just so telling. When her private secretary asked what her regional name would be, the name she would rule under, her response was immediate and remarkably pragmatic. My own name, Elizabeth, of course. What else? That straightforward, no-nonsense attitude perfectly set the tone for her entire reign.
Chapter 3. Modernizing the Monarchy. So the world around them is changing at lightning speed, and they knew for sure that their survival as an institution depended entirely on adapting. They had to break down what people called the curtain of mystery. First, and this was largely driven by Philip against some intense traditional opposition, they televised the 1953 coronation, bringing the sacred ceremony directly into millions of living rooms. Second, in 1970, they introduced the royal walkabout, stepping away from rigid itineraries to physically shake hands and chat with the public. And third, they leveraged their platforms for advocacy, with Philip becoming a very vocal early pioneer for environmental conservation in the 1960s. They basically wrote the modern playbook on PR. Now, what's really interesting about this is Philip's incredibly proactive approach to youth development. In 1956, he partnered with educator Kurt Hahn to establish the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. The whole idea was to counter what Hahn called the 6 declines of modern youth. Basically, a decline in fitness, initiative, memory, skills, self-discipline, and compassion. It was a brilliant move, and today, millions of young people across 144 nations have participated in this globally successful program to combat those exact societal concerns. And while Philip modernized through active patronages, Elizabeth modernized through something called soft power. So what does that actually mean? Basically, it's the ability to get desired outcomes using gentle persuasion, historical connection, and international cooperation rather than compulsion or force. As Britain's direct imperial power was rapidly declining, she brilliantly leveraged this soft power across the Commonwealth to encourage political accord and champion international cooperation.
Chapter 4. Decades of Crisis.
Of course, it absolutely wasn't all smooth sailing. Behind the scenes, they constantly struggled to balance incredibly rigid public duties with some very painful private family matters. And 1992 really sums this up. The Queen famously called it her annus horribilis, or horrible year. In that single year, the marriages of 3 of her 4 children utterly collapsed, and a devastating fire ripped through Windsor Castle, causing £60 million in damage. It was a period of intense public scrutiny. The monarchy frequently found itself navigating severe public backlash. For example, following the tragic death of Princess Diana in 1997, the monarchy faced massive criticism, which the Queen eventually addressed by giving a rare live broadcast to validate the public's immense grief. Then, decades later in 2022, they faced another severe crisis when Prince Andrew faced a civil lawsuit for sexual assault linked to his ties with Jeffrey Epstein. Taking decisive, distancing action, the Queen permanently stripped her son of all military titles and patronages, forcing him to face the lawsuit strictly as a private citizen. Chapter 5. An Enduring Royal Legacy. When you really step back and tally it all up, the sheer scale of their tenure is just staggering. 70. That is the number of years Queen Elizabeth II ruled. She wasn't just a monarch, she was a stabilizing constant in a rapidly spinning world, officially securing her place as the longest reigning monarch in the entirety of British history. And right there beside her is the number 69. For 69 years, Prince Philip served as her consort. Navigating what was a very complex role, he carved out a lasting legacy and became the longest-serving consort in British history. Elizabeth famously and quite movingly called him her strength and stay. So the crucial point is this number right here, 14. Queen Elizabeth worked with 14 different prime ministers. Just think about that massive span of history. She acted as a confidential, stabilizing anchor for the British government, starting all the way back with Winston Churchill and stretching right into the complexities of the 21st century. And perhaps what's most remarkable is how their adaptability reflected in their public standing. Despite the absolute rock-bottom lows of the late 90s, she rebounded spectacularly. By the 2012 Diamond Jubilee and Olympics era, her approval rating hit an incredible zenith of 90%. To put that in perspective, that is a polling number elected politicians around the world can literally only dream of. Which brings us to the immediate aftermath of her passing in September 2022 and the transition to King Charles III. Charles represents a decidedly modernized approach. He ascended as the oldest new monarch in history at age 73. He fulfilled his mother's final wish by having Camilla crowned as queen consort. And moving forward, he plans a distinct, slimmed-down monarchy that's heavily focused on the lifelong environmental advocacy he inherited from his father. This leaves us with a final, provocative question to ponder. Elizabeth and Philip guided an ancient institution through a century of unprecedented upheaval by mastering adaptability and soft power. But as the crown passes to a new generation, will the monarchy be able to maintain that immense global influence and delicate soft power in a totally new era under King Charles III? History is unfolding right now to give us that answer. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.